Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our panel, which is about the cybersecurity challenges for the year ahead. I think that we're waiting for an online connection. No? Okay, we'll see. Oh, hello. Hi, we have with us Mariette Schaake, which is the International Policy Director of the Cyber Policy Center of Stanford University. Hello, Mariette, I'm Kostas. Great to meet you.
Hi, nice to see you.
And also we have with us here in Athens, Jeff Bullwinkel. I hope I pronounced almost correctly.
That's very good.
He's the Associate General Counsel and Director of Corporate External and Legal Affairs of Microsoft Europe. Hello, Jeff.
Hello.
It's very nice to have you here with us in Delphi. So we have a limited time, so I think that we can start right away. And of course, we will start with the major development, the war on Ukraine, and from the cybersecurity perspective. And my first question, which can start from you, Jeff, and then Mariette, if you want to add something, of course, join in. It's what lessons have we learned about when it comes to cybersecurity from the Ukrainian war? What are the main challenges? Because cybersecurity is, cyber espionage is a major threat. And how big tech, working together with governments and organizations, can tackle these challenges? So, Jeff, if you want.
Thank you, Kostas. I'll say also it's always a pleasure to be here in Delphi, and good to see you as well remotely, Marietje. Look, I think we've all been obviously focused on the tragic events unfolding in Ukraine, obviously a horrific and unjustified, unprovoked war, and the images that we've seen even over the past week, I think, bring more sharply into focus the pain and suffering from the kinetic war that's underway. But I think it's also worth reflecting, as your question, I think, suggests, on the fact that this also is a cyber war that's very much in full swing, no question.
It's a fact.
It is, and you know, as a company, Microsoft has been actually in contact with a number of officials in the Ukrainian government leading up to the events of the war. And then actually in the hours, literally before tanks rolled across the border from Russia into Ukraine, we had our own team identify what was actually a new form of malware we'd not yet ever seen before, a wiper malware, so a kind of malware that effectively is meant to wipe devices clean of data on them. We called it Foxblade, and it was quite unique and seemed to be targeting government ministries as well as other organizations. And so we looked at this and recognized how significant it could be in Ukraine, and we're in contact with the right people in Ukraine, elsewhere in Europe, of course in the US as well, and managed to address that in the moment. But in the days following that, we've been quite intensively in discussions with officials in Ukraine, and what has really been an onslaught of cyber criminality, cyber activity that is coming from Russia. There's a group, for instance, that we as a company identified by the name of Nobelium some time ago. Nobelium is a source of some really dangerous malware as well. If you think about what happened in the year before, say 2020, we saw there were 6 different attacks by this group based in Russia called Nobelium, focused on Ukraine. And then you look at the last year, there were 1,200 attacks by the same group, Nobelium. Just last night, in fact, Microsoft published a blog by a guy named Tom Burt that was focused on the work of a group called Strontium, which is another Russia-based group that we've seen associated with the GRU, so the Russians, the military intelligence services, again, focused on attacking targets in Ukraine, with focus on government agencies, on critical infrastructure providers, on food supply, on a range of different actors in Ukraine and across the region. So you see this remarkable amount of, again, cyber activity in the context of what is a kinetic war. And I think that the question for Microsoft is, well, what does that mean for us? What should we do? And one thing we certainly have to do is make sure we are focused on doing all we can to defend our customers in Ukraine, across Europe, and around the world. And there are various things that we have done to try to address that.
So, Mariette, how can governments and other organizations cooperate effectively with big tech in order to protect those kind of cyber attacks when we're talking about a full-scale war also.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm sorry I'm not in Athens. It would have been a lot nicer to join you in person, hopefully next time. But as the war is on all of our minds, I think it's also important to note that it could have escalated a lot more, that there was a lot more fear about what Russian groups would do, what the government would do with its cyber capabilities. So I think it's important to really have risk and threat analysis in real time and to have it be assessed in the interest of a public understanding. And this is an enormous challenge because we hear more from companies like Microsoft about what is going on. From time to time we hear from the Ukrainian government, but there is not a consistent, transparent, publicly accessible threat assessment of what is happening, not only in Ukraine, but really globally. And we see, for example, crime, ransomware, malware, other kinds of criminal activities slowly, gradually blending into more state-led activities. We also saw a recent report from the US government, New York Times reported on it yesterday, that they had gone as far as taking down all kinds of malware groups, viruses globally in order to prevent the opportunity for the Russian state to exploit these malware viruses with more geopolitical goals or to simply cause damage, maybe in response to sanctions, for example. So the ecosystem we're looking at is complex, it is dynamic, and it is intransparent. And so I think we need to achieve more transparency in order for all of us to get a better understanding of how we, as democratic societies, as peaceful societies, would like to deal with the challenges coming from cyber threats and cyber attacks, whether it's from criminals or from states.
Thank you very much, and that gives me the opportunity to go to the next question, which is actually, we're talking about data sovereignty and digital sovereignty, which is a major topic of discussion in the EU and the transatlantic cooperation and the data exchange between EU and USA, which is a major topic right now in the EU level. So, Mariette, let's start with you because you also have your previous on your previous role. Also, you may have some more things to say. I don't know. We'll go to Jeff afterwards. Okay. What
for those who go ahead.
Sorry. What do you think? Also the implications of the war and how this will affect the discussion that we have right now about the data sovereignty and the digital sovereignty and the exchange of data through countries and from the EU and the USA.
Right, so the discussion about digital sovereignty and how to best protect data, protect people's rights through the data that they share or that may get collected on them has been long-standing, and I think it's not directly related to the war. Yeah. Although, of course, geopolitical threats, whether we see them in Asia or whether we see them in Eastern Europe, have prompted questions about how do we best protect our own, and this meaning the European own, self-interest, values that we care about, and what is needed. And here I think the word sovereignty is actually quite challenging, because when we look at the whole internet digital ecosystem, there is actually unprecedented mutual dependence and connectivity. And so it's really hard to sort of cut off supply chains, to cut off cloud computing, to isolate one continent from others. And I think for Europe it would be particularly difficult because it doesn't have as many European-grown companies to replace, let's say, American or Asian-based companies. Now, having said that, it is important that companies respect the levels of data protection, of data governance, of security, of integrity, all the kinds of standards that we believe in order to protect people and their rights when they do business in Europe or for European citizens. And that is what you see articulated in the general data protection as a goal. There's a lot to improve in enforcement, but that's the objective. And there will be more policies spelled out in order to make sure that the EU can determine how it wishes for companies, but also governments, to deal with data when they do. And I would say that the levels of protection are a critical component of the solution. And then, of course, the question remains, how can Europe become stronger as a producer of these very important technologies? And that's not only data related, it's also hardware related. And I think that those are two distinct, sometimes related, but really important tasks for the EU to pursue.
And thank you. And you, Jeff, what's your perspective from Microsoft's on this?
I very much echo, I think, what Marietje was saying, that this has been a debate, a conversation around data sovereignty that has been long-standing, ongoing, well before the conflict in Ukraine, to be sure. And frankly, I think it's understandable as people have become increasingly reliant on technologies, sometimes in some cases from a small number of global providers. There's increasing questions about trust and about control over data, and this is all understandable and appropriate, and things have to be done to address that, I think, and to protect sovereignty considerations. That starts, I think, with the private sector, frankly, making sure that we're doing things in a way that has sovereignty by design sort of built in. And for instance, just thinking about how we approach this topic at Microsoft, everything we do in cloud services rests on the 4 foundational principles that really are aimed at addressing sovereignty considerations. One is just the notion that our customers control their own data. It's not our data, it's our customers' data. Second, our customers have the ability to choose where their data sits, where it's hosted, where it's stored, where it's processed. Third, we have the obligation to protect our customers' data in a variety of ways through encryption, obviously arrest and in transit. And finally, that we will in fact defend our customers' data in the face of what we might consider to be an overreach by a government seeking access to data extraterritorially. And so we've taken actually a number of cases to court, including to the US Supreme Court, where we felt that there was government overreach in connection with data, all as a matter of protecting our customers' data sovereignty. And so that's something we can do, but we're one company in one sector. And quite clearly, there's a need for policymakers as well to have a role here too. And again, as a company, we've been very clear in expressing the need for the right level of regulation, including to address sovereignty issues as well. And you see a lot of that happening, I think, here in Europe, where we really have the center of gravity, I think, for regulations. You think about GDPR some time ago, the Data Act now, the AI Act, Digital Markets Act, Digital Services Act, all these policy proposals, in some cases regulations, are also aimed at sovereignty. So this has been, I think, a long-standing issue. At the same time, building on what Marietje said as well, I think it is fair to say that the conflict in Ukraine has somewhat reshaped the debate around sovereignty. It's just kind of had people focused on it in a somewhat different way, and I think in an encouraging way in relation to recognize the importance of a transatlantic collaboration and partnership in this space that is based upon shared European values. And that's certainly what we see happening in various different initiatives that are underway. You think about the Democracy Forum, for instance, that was hosted by President Biden just a year ago, something that here in Greece I think resonates quite strongly given the importance of democracy in this country as the birthplace of democracy. You think about the Trade and Technology Council, which again is a reaffirmation of the importance of the transatlantic EU United States relationship. You think also about the recent agreement reached just 2 weeks ago today, in fact, when President Biden was in Brussels visiting with European leaders, including President von der Leyen. They announced a new bilateral framework for the transfer of data from the EU to the US in the wake of the famous Max Schrems II decision. A new agreement will take shape, recognizing again the need for data to travel across the world, but in a way that does protect the sovereignty considerations and privacy interests of the customers who actually own that data.
Jeff, excuse me, what do you think about Greece's role in this new environment? How can a country like Greece, because we're talking about the EU level and the USA level, but a country like Greece, how can negate the rising cyber threats, and how it can actually protect this digital infrastructure? And I'm asking you, of course, because we also have the new data center region of Microsoft here in Attica.
Well, it's I think, exciting to see the role that Greece is playing, a leadership role in the context of not just this region, but Europe, I think, as a whole. I mean, we all know that Greece is not immune to cyber attacks. There have been some pretty prominent attacks over the course of time, including the Postal Service not long ago with a significant ransomware attack. And I think the government has done a number of things that are really quite important to reflect this level of leadership. And I think one of them is to embrace a cloud-first policy. If you will, which is something that the government has put through, but also I know that the opposition party also supports quite strongly. And this really is, I think, an important direction to be taken.
There is a consensus that this is the way to go forward.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, you think about the ability of, say, well, Microsoft, for instance, we spend historically about $1 billion a year on cybersecurity. We pledged recently to spend $25 billion over the next 5 years on cybersecurity because it is obviously a critical thing for our customers, and it'd be difficult for even a large enterprise to be able to replicate what we can achieve through our own measures. So embracing cloud, leaving room for the embrace of hyperscale cloud services is going to be promoting a more secure environment here in Greece, to be sure. Second, there's a focus on making sure you have the right level of training and skilling. I mean, we are seeing across Greece, across Europe, around the world, frankly, a shortage of cybersecurity professionals at a time when there is, huge need and need that grows all the time. And the government's also very much focused on that as well. So these are, I think, critical things that we're seeing Greece do in a way that reflects the right direction for Europe as a whole.
Thank you. Mariette, we'll go to you because we have only 2 minutes at our disposal right now, but I would like also to hear your opinion about how Greece can actually be better protected. A country like Greece can be better protected against cyber attacks. And I will also put not only cyber espionage, but also cybercrime, because we also have a rising wave of cybercrime. We see that the ransomware is a threat. We have ransomware attacks almost all the time. So I would like to hear your opinion.
Well, maybe 2 things, and briefly looking at time. One, I think it's very important that everybody in Greece, the government, the public, the media, civil society, can understand the status quo of the entire digital ecosystem that Greece is dealing with. And so I think a scan of where vulnerabilities are that are inevitable with the use of software and digitization, it is honestly not always a step towards more resilience to digitize. In fact, with more digitization come more risks for criminals, for espionage that you mentioned, for attacks in the worst case, and all of those should be prevented. Now, for Greece to do so successfully, obviously there are things it needs to do at home, but I strongly believe that all EU member states are well served by working together primarily when it comes to both cybersecurity and tech policy, because unfortunately Europe suffers from fragmentation quite a bit, and one sort of baked-in problem is the fact that the single market, economic policy is made on the EU level, and then national security and a lot of security policies are made on the national level. And there's friction between those because it's hard to make a resilient and secure digital single market if the competence to scan, for example, whether you want to bring in Chinese-made network technologies or whether you want to rely on American service providers to offer those services or rather seek European ones, are deliberations that are made 27 different times in Europe today, and it, in the end, makes it harder for Europe to be that strong geopolitical bloc, that democratic political bloc that I believe it should be in order to be the most successful in this, challenging area of tech governance at times of growing geopolitical tensions.
Mariette, thank you very much. Jeff, thank you very much. Also, we just have to conclude. I hope that we had an interesting discussion, and thank you to all the viewers. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.